My name is Saber, and every time a new Magic set comes out, I like to prepare myself for the pre-release and the first couple weeks of the set being available on like Magic Online and Arena and whatnot by going over all of the cards in the set, specifically that are instants, have flash, or that can destroy multiple creatures, and sometimes other permanents based on what the set is like. For example, if it's a Theros set, if it can destroy multiple enchantments, that becomes a lot more relevant. Um, I do apologize if the microphone is picking up the fan. It is ungodly hot, and my streaming space slash recording booth is probably the hottest room in the house. So I will die without the air on. And I do know that sometimes that gets picked up when I'm talking, but not necessarily when I stop. So that can be distracting if you're listening to it. I do apologize for that. So let me pull up my list that I make so I don't miss anything while going over it. So we're going to begin with the white cards. And the first card is actually a card with flash. It's Avengers Assemble. So for white and 4, it's an enchantment that gives heroes you control +2/+2, and at the beginning of each end step, if you attacked with a hero this turn or a hero entered the battlefield under your control this turn, you draw a card. So the main thing about this, and the main thing about a lot of things, is that you have to be aware of their existence. Otherwise, you can't do anything about them. The biggest reason why I go over these cards specifically is that in the first couple weeks when you're playing with the set and getting used to it, you don't necessarily know everything your opponent can do with their available mana that could ruin your game plan or suddenly win the game out of nowhere. But after you've been playing with the set for a few weeks, especially if you draft a lot, um, you'll encounter these cards enough, even the rare and mythic ones, to have some idea of what could possibly happen. Getting hit by a card like this out of nowhere when you don't know it's a possibility is going to be game ending, giving their entire team not only +2/+2 now, but for as long as this enchantment remains on the battlefield, is going to be an insurmountable advantage if you already played into it to begin with, or if you didn't block properly to save yourself from possibly this card. The way you play around most mass pump effects is you have to know what the value of the pump effect is and then block accordingly. The first step is always to make sure you don't die if they have the card. The second step is to make sure you lose as few creatures as possible, or that as many things as possible are trades. So, for example, you don't put your 5/5 on their 5/5 and let it get killed. You put your 5/5 on their 3/3 if you can, and put like your 1/1 on their 5/5. So that way, if they play the mass pump effect, you get to at least trade with their 3/3 or eat their 2/2, and you're losing like your smallest guy to their big thing. Again, the primary thing that you have to do is survive the mass pump effect, but once you can do that, figuring out where you can put your creatures to minimize the amount of damage this card can do goes a long way. Normally, mass pump effects are temporary and at lower rarities, so Avengers Assemble is going to catch a lot of people off guard. You only have to play around it if it's going to be game ending for you, though. So much like any other higher rarity card, sometimes you just have to shrug and go, well, if they actually have this, I can't beat it. And that's going to be true of a lot of the more powerful effects that we're going to see, is that sometimes you just can't do that much about it. But if you know it exists and you can play around it and still win the game, then you should. Like, you don't have to lose to this card if you know it's a possibility. And that's basically going to be true for a lot of the cards. I will explain how to play around them as we go through this, if there's any counterplay to them that I'm aware of. But for the most part, it's just being aware of the card and what your opponent can possibly do. If you know they can do it just because they have the colors of mana available, then you lose to it a lot less often. You don't just run right into it. And at least if you're running into it, it's because you have a plan, or because you have to go, yeah, I can't beat this card if they have it, or this card is very unrealistic, like it's a mythic rare, and if I keep playing around it, I'm probably going to lose more often than I'm going to win, but at least you're making the educated decision to attack into Captain Marvel here instead of getting ambushed by her and losing your best creature. So Captain Marvel is a 5 mana for a 5/4 with flash, flying, and lifelink. She also has the power up ability, and this is going to be super relevant to the flash creatures that have it, especially for this discussion. But the way power up works is it's an additional cost that you can pay at any time to give this creature a permanent bonus. Like in this case, it's a +1/+1 counter, an indestructible counter. The cost to activate it is reduced by the printed casting cost of the creature that has power up. So while it looks like you have to spend an additional 7 mana to do this, the turn that you cast her, it costs 3 generic and 2 white less. So if your opponent has 7 mana, Captain Marvel is a 6/5 flash flying lifelink indestructible. There is a narrow window between when she gets the last +1/+1 and indestructible and when she actually goes to block. And there is a card that gives -4/-4 at instant speed in the set. But past that, she is functionally a 6/5 flying flash lifelink indestructible, and that's going to turn a game around very quickly. If you run into Captain Marvel by accident and she ambush blocks one of your creatures, eats it, gains your opponent's 6 life, and is now there to attack you starting on the next turn, and you didn't leave up the -4/-4, for example, you played like something else pre-combat instead when you didn't really need to, you're going to feel absolutely horrible, because if you had a card like that available to you, you would have been able to kill her. You can also kill her in response to the indestructible counter with any other effect at instant speed that will destroy a creature. But the -4/-4 is like one of the cheaper effects that can do it, and we'll get into that when we get to the black cards. So the idea that you didn't need to run into her, you left yourself vulnerable to her, is going to feel absolutely terrible. So, and there are a lot of cards in this set that are of this power level, and most of the mass removal is actually on the bonus sheet. So, there's going to be a lot of incentive to throw haymakers in this set. And Captain Marvel is going to be one of the stronger ones you can encounter because of that. Next up is Helicarrier Strike. This is a variant on a card that we see a lot in Magic sets anymore. So it starts off at 1 white mana. It has the teamwork ability for 2, which means an additional cost to cast the spell. You can tap any number of creatures you control with total power 2 or more. The card itself deals 2 damage to target attacking or blocking creature, or if the teamwork cost was paid, it deals 4 damage to that creature instead. We get a lot of cards like this. This is one of White's basic removal spells, is being able to deal damage to or kill a creature that's attacking, blocking, or tap, depending on what particular wording they're looking for. In this case, it's attacking or blocking. So this can deal up to 4 damage to that creature. If you are worried about this card, the way that you play around it is you don't attack the utility creatures that you have into it for like an extra point of damage or 2. Like you don't attack Phil Coulson, who is like a 1/2 that can put a counter on each one of your heroes. I'm sorry, it's a 2/2, not a 1/2. Puts a 1/1 counter on each other hero you control. You should not run him into this if you're worried about it, since not only can he die to it, he also can't pump himself out of range. It's each other hero you control. So, if you're worried about a card like this, you don't attack your small utility creatures into it. You attack with creatures that can survive it, or with creatures that you don't mind getting killed by this effect, if you can help it. If you're going to lose the game, this is a lot of what comes down to playing around the cards. sometimes not attacking with your stuff because you're scared of a card's existence can also lose you the game, so you have to make your best educated guess. Like, if you can waste their mana or make them kill one of your less important creatures with Helicarrier Strike, that's what you want to do. If you can't really do that without falling too far behind or missing out on important damage, that you're going to lose the game anyway, whether they kill your guy or not. If they kill your guy, then you lose the game, but if you miss out on the damage, you're also going to fall too far behind in the damage race and lose the game. Then you have to attack into it and either hope they don't have it or make them use it now, so that way when you deploy your other threats later, they don't have a removal spell for them. That is how it normally goes in all Magic games, but when the removal is this cheap and efficient, it does become more of an issue because wasting mana is a huge thing in Limited. If you can get your opponent to hold up mana every turn and not do anything else, then you're going to win that game a lot of the time. But 1 mana is an awful small cost to be paid to be able to kill your opponent's 2 or even 4 toughness creature. In order for them to kill a 4 toughness creature, they also have to hold back something that they can tap for teamwork, though. So at least you've got that going on for you. Also of note that this is tapping the creature's additional cost. It's not a tap-activated ability. So creatures that are summoning sick can be tapped to pay this additional cost. So don't think just because they have just played their creature that they don't have access to this card anymore. Also, I'm talking about a lot as an attacking trick. It does also work as a blocking trick. It can kill your blocking creature or deal 4 damage to it to make a chump attack into your creature into a 2-for-1, which, depending on how much damage they're pushing and how good your creature is, might determine whether or not they would like to do that. So just be aware of it. Everything is going to be just be aware of it. If you know it's a possibility, you can make that educated choice and you don't have to just run into it every time. Next up is Night Nurse. So Night Nurse is very similar to Samwise from the original Lord of the Rings set. So she is 1 and a white for a 2/1 with flash. She has lifelink instead of the ring tempting you. And when she enters, you choose target permanent card in your graveyard that was put there from anywhere this turn and return it to your hand. So she is primarily used to get back something that got killed this turn, or that you sacrificed this turn, so that you can use it again. But she is also a 2-mana 2/1 with flash and lifelink, and that can throw off combat math significantly. One of the ways that you can lose a game that you think you're going to win is when you do the math, your opponent is going to either 0 or like -1 or -2, so you attack with all of your creatures, knowing that their best blocks are not going to be enough to save them, and all of a sudden this card pops out, and not only does it gain them back the 2 life from the lifelink, it's also going to block one of your creatures, preventing its damage from hitting them. So now all of a sudden you're just barely going to get there. All-out attack isn't lethal anymore. And you are now facing down your opponent's counterattack, which itself is probably going to be lethal in a lot of games where it was that close to begin with. So if your life total is also precarious, and this one is an uncommon too, and only costs 2 mana, the odds of running into this one are a lot higher than some other similar cards that can pull this off, like Captain Marvel coming down out of nowhere and gaining them 6 life and killing your best guy. Like, you were probably going to lose that one anyway, because then she's going to attack for 6 damage in the air and gain them another 6 life. So that one is nearly impossible to play around if you don't have removal for her at the time. This one, though, coming out of nowhere is a lot more likely. She's a lot cheaper and a lot less rare. So in a close game, this one might be why your opponent isn't dead. Also, if the goal is to trade off for some stuff, she might come down and rebuy the thing that you just traded off for, which is another frustrating thing. If you have to multi-block an opponent's large creature to kill it, and then Night Nurse comes down and just rescues that creature from the graveyard and they get to replay it either that turn or the next turn, it's going to feel like you didn't accomplish anything and you got 2 or 3 for 1. In fact, sometimes you will have gotten 2 or 3 for 1, as they will now have Night Nurse and the card back, and you will be down multiple creatures that you used to take down that creature in combat. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot you can do about that. She does very well against non-exile-based removal. Just pops in there, rescues your guy real quick, and then sticks around to gain you a few life and, attack and block and all of that stuff. So, that one's going to be fun to play against, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I remember a lot of things with Samwise. Samwise shows up in, like, power cubes and whatnot. He's so good. The 2-mana Samwise that can buy back your dead thing and let the ring tempt you. And she's got that same vibe, and she's an uncommon. I forget if Samwise was a rare or not. He might have actually been an uncommon, too. That set had a pretty high power level, as does this set. So, Panther Pounce. So this is one of the more mild cards that you're going to encounter in this set. So it's 1 white for an instant. Target player investigates. Target creature gets +1/+0 and gains flying until end of turn. Untap it. So it's still doing an awful lot. First of all, it's giving the player that casts it the ability to draw a card later on. So you're going to encounter this combat trick a little more often because of that. A lot of the times, a trick that doesn't give a more significant boost or a way to protect the creature is not going to be worth it. The fact that it will draw you the card also, and there are a small number of cards in the set that would greatly benefit from having the clue token itself lying around. There are cards like Bullseye who can throw cards that you have in play, like non-creature artifacts, at opponents and their creatures to deal damage. I believe the discard a card from your hand to draw 2 cards red card also gives you the option to sacrifice an artifact instead. So things like that gain a little more mileage out of a card like Panther's Pounce making a clue token. But the other thing is that the +1/+0 flying and untapping it means that the creature is very good at ambushing flyers now. Because all of a sudden it is both back to block, untapped, flying in the air. Yeah, back to block and untapped. It's back to block because it's untapped. You can tell I do all of this extemporaneously. It's back to block. It now has flying. The extra power is kind of whatever on a lot of things. It does mean that it will be able to take down a slightly larger creature that it might not have been able to. It also means that you can throw this creature up into the air offensively if the opponent has no blockers. So this is whatever their strongest ground creature is, plus an additional power suddenly in the air coming at you, which can be a thing if you don't have flying blockers or don't have good flying blockers for this thing. So Panther Pounce is one of those type of cards. It's not going to be massively impactful a lot of the time, but the few times where it is, it's going to feel like it came out of nowhere and ruined everything for you. Again, just suddenly being able to block the flying creature and kill it in combat where that wasn't going to happen before, or the creature is now jumping at you in the air and you're going to take way more damage than you thought you were going to take this turn, and your chump blocker on the ground isn't doing you any good anymore. Both of those are factors. Again, this is a very high power level set, it feels like, so cards like this will probably not make the main deck as often, but the fact that it also lets you draw a card, and it does it by making a clue token when there are other cards in the set that can turn an artifact into additional resources besides the one card drawn from it. It can either save you mana, let you keep a different card in hand that you wanted to for your discard thing, kill a small creature, means that this card is going to see a bit more play than it normally would in other sets. Next up is the Red Guardian. This is 2 and a white for a 2/2. He has Flash, and when he enters, he destroys target creature and opponent controls that dealt damage this turn. Notably, the damage dealt Doesn't have to be to you, it can be to a creature. There are no planeswalkers or battles in this set. I'm a tiny bit surprised we didn't get like the Battle for New York or something as a card in this set, but maybe they're saving it for a different Marvel set. It does destroy anything that has dealt damage this turn that opponent controls. So it does have to wait until the damage is dealt. Like Red Guardian can't save you or your creature from anything. He can only avenge that creature or your face being hit this turn. But he does work to kill anything. Like if it was just the creatures bouncing off of each other, if they have higher toughness than power on each one of them, he can then flash in and kill the opponent's creature. Also, he's going to kill your thing after you've dealt damage, so that can ruin your plans if it's like, okay, it's a 2-turn clock, so I hit them this turn, and then I'm going to hit them next turn, and I'm going to win the game, and now your creature is dead because it hit them this turn in the first place, and now you have to find another lethal threat to replace it. So that is the threat that Red Guardian represents, is killing your creature after it has dealt combat damage, so that way you don't get to deal combat damage again. It's still not crazy powerful, but it is a way to kill a creature that you couldn't deal with before because it got in for damage, or a way to kill a creature that was problematic that you had to chump block anyway. So that is what the Red Guardian's going to add. Next is Supervillain Lockup. So this is 1 and a white for an enchantment. It has flash. When this enchantment enters, it exiles target tapped creature an opponent controls until this enchantment leaves the battlefield. So this is an O-ring type effect with flash that can deal with an attacking creature or obviously a tapped creature for any reason, but it's typically going to pop out in the middle of combat defensively for the opponent and exile one of your attacking creatures. So that is something to be aware of. It's very similar, playing around this card is very similar to the Helicarrier, where you just don't attack the thing you can't afford to lose into their removal spell if you can help it. This is an uncommon, so it's going to show up a little less often, but it's still going to show up a lot. You're going to get hit by this thing fairly often when playing, because this is a premium removal spell. Everybody who gets this is going to be running it. Next up is Take Up the Shield. So this is the type of combat trick that always gets me. I'm pretty sure this one is a reprint, honestly. If it's not, it's very similar and has a similar name to a previously existing Magic card, but I think this is from like Dominaria United and just had like the perfect name for what it's doing. So it's 1 and a white for an instant. It puts a +1/+1 counter on target creature, and that creature gains lifelink and indestructible until end of turn. So the big thing about Take Up the Shield is that it leaves behind a permanent buff on the creature, in addition to making sure that creature does not die this turn. And that is the type of thing that always winds up getting me specifically. One of the things that I like to do with combat tricks is provoke the opponent to use them as soon as possible. And what I mean by that is, if I have a 2/2 and you have a 2/2, and it's the early game, I'm almost always going to attack into your creature, and I'm almost always going to block your creature, because a 2/2 on turn 2 is a decent amount of damage over the course of the game. A 2/2 on turn 4 or 5 is part of a collective block on a larger creature, or a way to trade off for something with high power and low toughness. It stops being a relevant attacking threat as soon as like the second 3/3 hits the table normally. So I want my opponents to use their combat tricks to save a 2/2 or something small, something early, something that's not a huge problem, because Take Up the Shield is going to save whatever you target it with. It's going to gain indestructible, so it dodges almost all the removal in this set. It's going to get a +1/+1 counter and lifelink, so it's going to gain them a ton of extra life. You do not want them hitting the Hulk with this thing. You want them to take up the shield on, like one of the common or uncommon 2/2s. You want them to save like Agent Carter or something, not She-Hulk or You know, like if you get them to save like a Maria Hill or Agent of Atlas with this thing instead of Captain Marvel, although she's already indestructible. Let's say they didn't have the mana for that, and they don't, and then next turn they don't have the mana. They haven't hit like 7 mana yet, so they cast her, and you get ruined. You don't want them to be able to save her because they don't have the 7 mana to give her the indestructible counter. With this 2 mana trick, you don't want them to have that in their hand when you go to kill her finally. So if I can get my opponent to use a card like this early, that's usually good for me. The problem is that because it leaves behind a permanent buff, is that now they're 2/2s a 3/3, so now my next creature is also in danger of trading with it. Whereas before, I was going to trade off my creature for it or their trick, and then deploy my 3/3, and so since I traded off for their trick, now their 2/2 is being stonewalled by my 3/3. So when I say this is the type of trick that always gets me personally, that's what I mean. Like, the permanent power and toughness boost is actually a bit of an issue when that is my playstyle. Alright, so that is the last white card that meets my criteria. So our first blue card is Depower. So this is 2 in a blue for an instant, but it costs 2 less to cast if it targets an attacking creature. Target creature gets -4/-0 until end of turn, and you draw a card. So when this spell consistently costs 1 mana, it has been one of my favorite combat tricks in past Magic sets. It does not show up as often as other cards that show up frequently. The 2 times it has shown up, the draw a card clause has required you to control a creature of a specific type. I believe both times it was Wizard, but it was a different card name. The first one was in Lorwyn block, and the second one was in Zendikar Rising. And it was 1 blue to give a creature -4/-0 until end of turn. And if you control the appropriate creature type, and I believe it was Wizard both times, you draw a card. But this time it's now contingent on either spending extra mana or the creature being attacking. So the biggest problem with a card like this is now your creature is dealing significantly less damage. So if you attack your 6/6 into like their 3/3 and their pair of 2/2s with the idea that's like, okay, I'm going to lose my 6/6 and they're going to lose a 3/3 and a 2/2 here. So that's going to clear up the board so that when I play my next threat, they don't have all of these creatures around to block it anymore. Now all of a sudden you're only killing one of the 2/2s and they still have a 3/3 and a 2/2, and it's a lot easier for them to replace like 1 more point of power to threaten to gang block your next creature, and they got to draw a card out of it. So being aware of a card like Depower suddenly ruining your game plan is super important, because when this card is good, it's amazing. When it's bad, it still draws a card, so it's not the worst. Next card is Giant-Sized Flying Ant. This is blue and 2 for a 3/2 with flash, flying, and when it enters, you choose one. You tap target non-land permanent, or you untap target non-land permanent. So the upside to your opponent ambushing you with this card is it's almost definitely going to die. Like, if this thing flashes out, it's going to get into combat with something and almost definitely die. The downside to it is that it's also probably going to untap one of their other things, so that is now also available to block where it was not before. And the worst downside for your opponent having this card is sometimes they're not going to block with the 3/2. They're going to untap the other thing and use that to block because it's a much better blocker, and then they're going to attack you on their next turn, because they flashed it in the middle of combat here, with their 3/2 flying creature, because you don't have a decent blocker, or it's at least going to trade with your flyer that you didn't want to lose, that you didn't attack with last turn, or that you just played post-combat to make up for your dead creature. Also, it can flash in and tap down the flying blocker end of your turn, and then they can untap and attack with their 3/2 flyer and any other flyers that can now suddenly get through, or any other creatures that can get through for that matter. If Captain Marvel's distracted by a giant flying ant, Makes it a lot easier to get in for damage with all of your other creatures. Next up is I Am Iron Man. So we see a card like this fairly often too. This is the until end of turn, target artifact or creature becomes an artifact creature with base power and toughness 4/4, and in this case gains flying, and you draw a card. The drawing a card thing is going to be huge on this because when it doesn't draw you a card, when it just makes a one turn attacker or blocker, that's usually not that great, even if you get a card's worth of value out of it. But tacking on the cantrip effect to it, where you get to draw a card for having cast the spell, makes this a lot better. This is another card that works really well with like the clue token from Tiger's Pounce and other similar effects, where it's turning a thing that was already a minor reward for playing the card to begin with into an actual problem for the opponent, because now you get to draw a card off I Am Iron Man almost all the time. There's not a ton of artifact and enchantment removal at instant speed, so if you target a non-creature artifact, it's most likely going to become a 4/4 and be a problem for the opponent, and you're going to get to draw your card. Even if they can kill it afterwards, at least you got your card draw out of it. And now that it's a creature, they have to worry about whether it's going to attack and block. So if they have creature removal and they have to use it on this thing, because now it's going to, like, if this suddenly is going to eat their giant size flying ant that ruined your combat step last turn, now you get to I Am Iron Man up something and put a 4/4 in front of their 3/2 and draw a card for doing that. That's going to be pretty good. So when this card draws a card, it's a lot better. It still requires a pretty specific deck to be good, because it is not only itself a non-creature spell, but it works best on artifacts that aren't already creatures. Like, obviously you can turn... I'm looking at the Hydraulic Helper arm over here. You can turn this from a 2/3 defender into a 4/4 flying defender, and that's going to let it do more in combat than it could before, but that's not where it's at its best. It's turning something that isn't a creature into a creature, giving you an extra attacker or blocker, and drawing you a card that turn. That is where this card shines. So you're not going to see it super often, but there is a artifact-centric deck for blue-red because of Iron Man and his focus on artifacts. So that is where this card is going to show up, and cards like this have been very hit or miss, and usually it's the cantrip aspect of them that makes them a bigger hit. Things that just define power and toughness on the card aren't necessarily that good, but the drawing a card is what's going to do it. Also, as a small side note, this is not limited to an artifact or creature you control, so this can downgrade a significantly larger creature. Turning the Hulk into a 4/4 flying artifact after blocks have been declared when he was like an 8/8 beforehand might actually allow you to trade with him in combat, and since you're drawing a card off of this thing, that also means that you're not down the 2-for-1 if you put like your decent sized creature on him and like Iron Man him up, thus reducing him back down to like puny Bruce Banner in a mech suit, and that actually allows you to win the fight. Then you're not down 2 cards. So another little thing to keep in mind with this card is that it does do that. Watch out for 1/1 counters. Those are not affected. The creature, if it has a counter on it, will be a 5/5 instead of a 4/4. So make sure you're doing your math correctly on that one. Similarly, effects like Giant Growth, which is in the set, do also affect the power and toughness. It's only base power and toughness, and newer players might not realize that and think that they're going to turn the creature back into a 4/4 afterwards, and that is not how that works. Next up is Shield Flying Car. So this is 2 and a blue for an artifact vehicle with flash and flying. Its crew cost is 1, and when this vehicle enters, you exile up to 1 target creature you control and return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So it's still able to save a creature from targeted removal and from a board wipe, since you can flash this in. It itself is not a creature until it's crewed, so if it is vulnerable to the board wipe as a creature, it might not be vulnerable to it as an artifact only. And then you will get your creature back at end of turn. I say that because there are multiple board wipes in the set that let you choose an attribute for the creature. They're both based on Thanos' snap. One is Thanos himself, the other is Extinction Event reflavored as the snap. So they're both choosing odd or even and killing everything. The car being an odd number doesn't matter if it's not a creature at the time. So the biggest problem with this card is that it's going to save your opponent's creature from removal. Because that's what it does. It comes in out of nowhere, blinks their creature so that it doesn't get killed, or saves their creature from a combat that went sideways, or just from trump blocking. Like, they block your non-trampling creature, flash in the flying car, blink their guy out, so now they have their creature again, and they also have a 3/3 flyer potentially attacking you on their next turn. Similar to the Ant, if it comes down on the opponent's turn and then you untap with it, it's no longer summoning sick and can attack. Next up is Super Suit. 1 in a blue for an artifact equipment with flash. When it enters, you can attach it to a target creature you control. It untaps that creature, and the equipped creature gets +1/+2, and the equip cost is 2. So, this can save a creature from damage-based removal, or from a combat situation where the creature is going to die to combat damage. It can also let the creature kill a larger creature than previously thought. So if you thought you were going to eat their creature, or that they had a bad block, and now all of a sudden their creature is not only +1 power, but also +2 toughness, so now their 2/2 can eat your 3/3, for example. And it can also untap the creature, so they can attack into you with the 2/2. You can choose not to block with your 3/3 going, I'm just going to attack you back for 3 damage. And Super Suit can now come down and still eat your 3/3. Again, this is the type of combat trick that really gets me because it leaves behind a permanent bonus, in this case an equipment that can not only save that creature and keep that creature large enough to keep rumbling with my stuff, but also then move around later on. I don't think this card is particularly strong, but it's still going to show up some amount of the time, and it's still going to get me every time it does because of that. Again, just being aware of it and what it can do is going to be the only thing that's going to save your creatures from always getting hit by it. But sometimes it's not going to be possible to dodge around it. Next up is Thirst for Knowledge. So there aren't a ton of card draw spells in this set, and there aren't a ton of counter spells. There aren't a ton of instant speed card draw, and there's not a ton of counter spells in this set. So normally when I warn people about the set, like the instance that they have to look out for, the reason why I go over card draw is because counter spells, your opponent has to leave up mana and wait for you to do something in order for their counterspell to do anything. And if you can make them waste their mana by not giving them a good target, or not giving them any target, depending on what the board state is, you can usually get a huge mana advantage out of not giving them anything to counterspell if you can help it. The way they undo this massive mana disadvantage is by having other instant speed spells that they can cast. And if they don't have creatures with flash, card draw is the next best thing, because it will at least get them towards having more plays and having more mana available, so that way they can keep playing their cards and still hold up the mana for their counter spells. That's less of a factor in this set, but every other instant in the set is still a reactionary card on some level, or can be played as one. So if they don't have to play their card, and they can use this to draw cards instead, or this might just be what's holding priority for them on Arena. It's like, okay, they keep getting priority and they're not casting anything. What is an end of turn? It's Thirst of Knowledge, because they didn't want to do anything or couldn't do anything else. We Say Thee Nay is one of the counter spells in the set. Is 1 in a blue for an instant. It has teamwork. It also has arcane, by the way, which is completely irrelevant in this set, but it does herald back to original Kamigawa and its arcane sub-theme. So it has teamwork too, so you counter a target spell unless its controller pays 2. If the teamwork cost was paid, they have to pay 4 instead to avoid having their spell countered. Now, being able to pay 2 extra mana for your spell is something that can be done a lot of the time if you're worried about a mana leak type effect. There have been tons of cards in recent sets where it's blue and a 1, counter the spell unless they pay 2, and sometimes it has some other rider on it, like this one does. Being able to pay 4 mana for your spell in addition to its casting cost is a huge step up in what you have to hold back in order to guarantee that your spell resolves. So you do have to be aware when this is the possibility. If you are close to being able to pay the 4, or if you have multiple spells you want to cast in the turn. Normally what you would do to play around counter spells is you play the weaker spell first to bait them into countering your spell, and there is actual counter spell and 3 steps ahead on the bonus sheet, so you might still want to do that on occasion, but this is the one that's actually in the set and is a lot more likely to show up. So this is the one that you should be playing around more often, and in that scenario, you don't want to play your worst spell first, you want to play the better spell first, if you can hold up to 4 mana to make sure it resolves through a We Say Thee Nay counterspell. And our last card is the Wondrous Wasp. She is 1 in the blue for a 2/1 with flash and flying, and when the Wasp enters, tap up to 1 target creature, it loses all abilities for as long as the Wondrous Wasp remains on the battlefield. So, yeah. Already kind of a Pestermite. She cannot untap things, but she does tap a thing, which means pre-combat she can lock down your best attacker for a turn, or end of turn she can tap down your best blocker and then untap and be available for attacking. But also she robs that creature of its abilities as long as she's on the battlefield, which means if she taps down a powerful effect on a ground creature, that creature is just going to have to sit there and watch her sail over its head to deal damage to you every single turn until you can find something that can get in her way or kill her. In the past, a 2 mana, 2 power creature with flying was usually a game ender. Like, you go back like 15 years in the history of Magic, this is such an aggressive creature. And while it's not as good as it used to be, this is still an absurd powerhouse. Like, being able to flash in a 2 power flyer on turn 2 on your, whichever turn 2, so that either your opponent's turn 2 if you're on the play, or your opponent's turn 3 if you're on the draw, and have it available for attacking, and immediately start beating them down with the 2/1 is already incredibly strong. And the fact that it will rob their creature of an ability if they have one in play, and make it so that the creature can't block or attack for a turn cycle, is probably going to make this one of these stronger 2-drops in the set. So yeah, be aware that your creature might suddenly lose indestructible in the middle of combat because the Wasp poked it. Alright, so our first black card is Dark Deed. This is the card I was referencing before. So this is just better Last Gasp. 1 in a black, for an instant, target creature gets -4/-4 until end of turn. This is the thing that you want to save for whatever dire threat that they have that it can actually kill. There are so many cards in this set that are nearly impossible to deal with without losing card advantage. And this deals with a lot of them. This might be the best common in the set. This is a common, right? Not an uncommon. Oh wait, no, that's an uncommon. Sorry, it looked like it was a common at first, but no, it's silver. Alright, this is definitely the best uncommon in the set, I think. Dark Deed kills a lot of the things, and it kills the ones that are nearly impossible to kill, like Captain Marvel and Doctor Doom over here. Doom is indestructible as long as you control an artifact creature or a plan, and he makes 2 artifact creatures when he enters. Like, he is surrounded by Doombots, and you know he has an evil plan hatching. It's literally right next to him. So, being able to kill these otherwise unkillable things is going to be a huge deal, and Dark Deed deals with a lot of the more problematic cards in this set. It gets rid of, I believe it gets rid of the Captain America with the shield counter, also the Mythic Captain America. I believe he's a 3/4, so yeah, Dark Deed's going to be your best friend when it's in your deck, and the thing that you have to watch out for most with your nearly unstoppable killing machines. If you can play around Dark Deed in any way, shape, or form, you probably should. Like, if you can wait and hold up your protection spell, if you can cast them a turn or two later and hold up a protection spell in addition to that, so that way you don't have to worry about Dark Deed or wait for them to tap out, you probably should. This is going to be that one card that deals with so many different highly problematic cards in the set. For very cheap, too. That's the other thing, like, you're killing, like, 6 mana Doctor Doom, 5 to 7 mana Captain Marvel for just 2 mana. Or your opponent is going to deal with your otherwise unstoppable bomb for just 2 mana. So, yeah, Dark Deed, very potent card. Definitely should be on your radar when your opponent's playing black. Another card that you want them to use on, like, anything less important than your best card. Decoy Ploy is 1 in a black. For an instant, you can choose one or both. It returns target villain card from your graveyard to your hand, or target hero card from your graveyard to your hand. This is similar to the card draw effect, where the fact that it's an instant is more, this is what your opponent is getting priority for. You might think it's Dark Deed, and then all of a sudden it's Decoy Ploy. This is still a pretty brutal card, but more in the general sense. Like, it's not going to ambush you and ruin your day so much as it's going to pull their creature back from the graveyard and let them untap and cast it. Sometimes it will get them back 2 creatures for 2 mana, and that's going to be especially brutal. In black, most of the characters are villains, but there are a few morally gray characters in black that are both heroes and villains. So even if your opponent is very heavily into black in this set, or even mono black, they might still have a few heroes to pull back with this card also. One of the few things you can do if they are very heavily weighted towards villains is if you can kill more villains or kill a creature that happens to be a hero, keep killing their villains, just so that way they can't get back both creatures with their card. Now, granted, like a lot of the other things I said, sometimes trying to be clever about it and not giving them their second target puts you in a much deeper bind, because the hero has been more of a problem, and if you had gotten rid of it earlier before they drew their Decoy Ploy, it wouldn't have been in play for the past, like, 3 turns, and you would have been better off. So there is a certain amount of fancy play syndrome going on with that suggestion, but sometimes it's going to be the thing, like, if they're very obviously throwing their hero at you to get it killed because they want it in the graveyard so they can get a hero and a villain back, you don't have to oblige them if it's not going to actually kill you. And if you can kill any of their other villains instead, so they're still only getting back their best villain, that might be the better play. Next up is Hour of Defeat. This is 3 in a black. For an instant. It destroys target creature and surveils 1. This is the bread and butter removal spell of the set. It kills anything at any mana cost that isn't indestructible or hexproof. And yes, there are a couple things in this set that we've already seen that are pretty dire that have indestructible, and there are a couple of cards in the set that have hexproof also. So yeah, Hour of Defeat is not the catch-all removal spell, but it's the closest thing that you're going to get in this set. So this is the black removal spell that you're worried about. It is 4 mana, and its rider text is being able to surveil 1. Next up is MODOK. So MODOK has an ability that's not quite mass removal, but I do always include the Infest effects and the Pyroclasm effects. and he is one of those. So MODOK is 3 black for a flying lifelink villain. He's a 2/2. He can pay 3 life to you can pay 3 life to have him connive, only during your turn. And he also gives creatures your opponents control -1/-1. This is a static effect. The only other cards that have done this before have been things like Kaervek and Curse of Death's Hold, and those cards can be incredibly brutal in limited. Having all of your creatures get -1/-1 while the opponents stay at their normal size, though, is surprisingly frustrating. So MODOK is something you have to be aware of because there are a lot of X1 tokens running around, which he instantly wipes out. Like, unless you can pump their toughness or counter MODOK. If he ever hits the table, state-based actions are going to put all of your 1 toughness creatures in the graveyard before you gain priority to kill him. So you will not be able to save your 1 toughness creatures from him. Also, creatures with damage marked on them can die from the -1/-1. If your opponent attacks with a bunch of stuff, then all of your things that survived by 1 toughness in that combat are also going to die now. And very similar to the tokens, you will not get a chance to save them if MODOK hits the battlefield. Yeah, by the time you get priority to activate an ability or cast a spell, MODOK's effect will already have cleaned up anything with 1 toughness or that has enough damage on it that the -1/-1 kills it. Next up is Stolen Stark Tech. This is another equipment with flash, so it's 1 in a black, it has flash. When it enters, it attaches to target creature you control. That creature gains indestructible until end of turn. It gives +1/+0 and has an equip cost of 1. So this is an effect that we see basically in every set. It comes in one of 2 flavors. It's either the indestructible, or if this creature would die this turn, or when this creature dies this turn, return it to the battlefield, usually tapped at that point. So +1/+0 and indestructible. The indestructible part is going to be the big thing because it's going to save the creature from a removal spell or from a bad combat. And then it's going to still be around with an extra power. And then after that, they're going to be able to spend a mana to make one of their creatures have an extra power on other turns, which is still going to be a thing. So, again, this is the type of card that gets me, because it leaves behind a permanent bonus that makes the creature even better at its job afterwards, in addition to not having killed their creature in the first place. And there are a lot of incredibly powerful creatures in this set worth protecting, so I would not be surprised to see a card like this see more play than it normally would because of that. Like, oh, you actually managed to kill Dr. Doom? Well, no, you didn't. He's indestructible, and he's going to keep drawing me cards for the rest of this game. Thunderbolt's Conspiracy is the next card, so it's 3 in a black for an enchantment with flash. Whenever a villain you control dies, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a finality counter on it. That creature is a hero in addition to its other types. This is another incredibly dumb one if the opponent's deck is full of villains, which, like I said, almost all of the black creatures are villains, even the heroes in black. Some of them are also villains. And notably, it doesn't have to be not a hero when it dies either. It just comes back and is a hero in addition to its other types. The finality counter is what actually stops it from coming back forever. This means that the combat that you thought was going well for you, where you were going to make a bunch of trades and eats, is now going terribly for you because all of their creatures are still alive, all of your trade creatures are still dead, and the ones that ate your stuff, it's like, but they kind of didn't because they're still in play. And whatever damage they got through, and now everything that died is back on their side of the board, untapped and ready to block. So their big attack, where you thought you were going to survive, all of a sudden not so much. Also, because it gives the hero type to them, it means that any hero synergies they might have just randomly in this set full of superheroes are now online for their villains also, where they might not have been before. So, Visions of Villainy. So this is another card draw spell. It's 2 in a black for an instant. You draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. It costs 1 less to cast if you control a villain. Again, this might just be what's giving them priority. And the last one is Widow's Bite. So 1 in a black. It has Teamwork 3. You choose one. If the spell was cast using Teamwork, choose both instead. Target creature gains Death Touch until end of turn, or target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. So there are a couple things going on with this card. First of all, it's actually very good defensively. Being able to assign blockers and then tap them to pay the additional cost for Teamwork, so that one of those blockers that was going to be a chump is now a Death Toucher and is a trade. And being able to either kill an X2 or shrink another creature down, so that way it's also now not a good attack anymore where it was before, is going to be very frustrating. This card is obscenely good on defense. It is decent on offense, especially if you can leave back a 3-power creature that you don't mind tapping, or some smaller creatures that weren't getting through anyway, and combine them for the Teamwork cost. But it seems like it does a lot better on defense, where it suddenly kills 2 of their things, like makes their attack terrible where it looked like it was good beforehand. So yeah, this is another one to be aware of. Also, just 2 mana -2/-2 is a perfectly serviceable effect in a lot of decks. Next up in red, so our very first card is Avengers Disassembled. So 1 red, choose one or both. Avengers Disassembled deals 3 damage to each creature, or destroy target land, and its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, tapped, and shuffle. So this is our Pyroclasm effect for the set. It does 3 damage at 3 mana, so it kills a lot of the smaller creatures in this set. So you do have to be aware of that. Not only because it will tell you like which creatures are going to die if they just cast it, but also similar to what I was talking about with MODOK, damage is still marked on creatures after combat. So if they deal 3 damage to your 5/5 that took 2 damage in combat, blocking their 2/2 that was going to die to this effect anyway, then they still get to kill your 5/5 here. So be aware that this is a possibility if they're attacking a lot, especially if they're attacking a lot of little creatures into your much larger creatures. Because this is a sorcery, they can't use this one defensively after they block. So they might have to do it this way in order to either get through a bunch of damage and race you with their little guys versus your 1 or 2 big guys, or hope that you block so that way they can kill a bunch of your stuff that where theirs was going to die anyway. The ability to destroy a land is relevant in this set because there are a lot of non-basic lands that are going to be used for fixing, but it still gets a replacement land, so assuming they weren't on a very light splash and taking advantage of the dual lands in this set to do that, they're probably going to have another way to get that color of mana. Next up is Blazing Crescendo. This is a reprint. Red and 1 gives target creature +3/+1 until end of turn, and exiles the top card of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play that card. So it's a combat trick that essentially draws a card in the most red way possible, in that it gives you the card, but you have to use it soon. It does give you until the end of your next turn, though. So if you have to use it offensively, you still have a full turn cycle to play it. And if you use it defensively, you get to play it during your next turn. Now, a lot of times, +3/+1 isn't going to save their creature, but it will allow their creature to trade up. And if it ever allows their creature to actually win combat, it's going to feel great for them because it's also giving them a card. That one can be very brutal. It does require that the creatures be even on like your power to their toughness to save their creature, but again, it also allows their creature to trade up. The same thing I said before about like the 2/2 getting blocked by your 5/5, and all of a sudden you're losing your 5/5 is true for this one also. Next up is Hire a Crew. So this is 2 and a red for an instant. It makes a 2/1 black villain creature token with menace. Then creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. So there's a couple different things going on with this card. It is an instant speed blocker in red, which does not happen very often. Red, not exactly known for its flash creatures, more its haste creatures. So the fact that they can suddenly have an extra body out of nowhere in red is actually a very rare effect. I said actually a whole lot there, but that's because this is a very rare effect for red to actually get. More actuallys. Um, the other effect on it, though, is much more common for red, and that is a mass pump effect that does not give extra toughness. So this is another one of those, you're playing around the mass pump effect by making sure that your creatures outmuscle them by extra power and toughness. This does lead to the other cards being more possible, though. Again, putting your 5/5 on their like 3/3 or 2/2 would normally be the play, and sometimes that's still going to be the play because this thing is going to let them trade up more often if you put like, a 4/4 on a 3/3 and a 5/5 on a 4/4, then it is going to be likely that their mass burn spell is what's going to be finishing off your creatures, and the crescendo doesn't normally save their things anyway if you're putting like higher power on their lower toughness. So in that regard, you're still playing around some of their stuff while playing around higher crew. Just make sure you don't get killed by it by not blocking is the big thing. And also know that they're going to have an extra 2/1 back to block. Also, if they have to use this defensively, this thing will be a 3/1 when it's blocking, and all of their other creatures will have an additional power for the purposes of trying to get the best blocks possible in this particular combat. Next up is Hulk Smash. Teamwork 4. You choose one. If the teamwork cost was paid, you can choose both instead. Destroy target non-creature artifact, or target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature an opponent controls. This is a removal spell for your fancy artifacts that aren't creatures. Notably, it destroys a non-creature artifact, which means that the I Am Iron Man can actually save your powerful artifact from this particular removal spell. Because they do have to choose all of their targets at the time that they're casting it, so the fact that you're turning it into a creature won't then allow them to use the punch effect to target that creature also. It is a punch, not a fight, so they will get to keep their creature if it doesn't get killed by removal spells in response, and you will lose your creature. So it is a removal spell in that regard also, and that's going to be the more common way it's played. So you do have to watch out for them just randomly being able to kill one of your creatures for 2 mana in the middle of combat, in addition to whatever they're blocking. Alright, next up is Lightning Strike. Let me fix my posture as I'm sliding down in my chair. So Lightning Strike is a reprint. It's 1 in a red. It deals 3 damage to any target. So for newer players, especially, if you've been playing for a long time, you already know this, but for newer players, burn used to always be able to go to creature or to the opponent. Like, almost every burn spell that got printed that was worth considering playing could also damage the opponent. That is very rarely true anymore. Lightning Strike is a very efficient burn spell. Lightning Bolt is so powerful that it has warped entire formats around it, because 1 mana to be able to kill a 3 toughness or less creature means that things that cost a bunch of mana but only have 3 toughness aren't usually worth playing anymore, no matter how good their effects are while they're in play, because they're not staying very long. So we do not normally get Lightning Bolt in standard legal sets. In fact, we very rarely get Lightning Strike for the same reason. So Lightning Strike is going to be one of Red's best spells, if not Red's best spell. And you do have to be very aware of this thing, because if you start to get low on life, it stops being creature removal and starts becoming player removal. If you block in such a way that you kill a bunch of their stuff, keep your stuff alive, and take 2 points of damage and go from 5 to 3, you suddenly lose the game. And the worst part is, if you block correctly to not die, you probably lose your best creature now, because they can Lightning Strike to finish it off anyway, and then there's a bunch of trades going on, and so now your board state is decimated, and you're down to a low life total still. So yeah, Lightning Strike, probably Red's best common, is certainly going to be a thing you have to be aware of. You cannot let your life total get as low as you normally would. This is the extra bit of reach. Before they keyworded reach to mean a creature that can block creatures with flying, reach was a term for the ability to finish off your opponent once the game gets all gummed up. You know, like they have a bunch of flyers or actual reach creatures and they have a ton of ground creatures, so you're not getting through for damage anymore. It's going to take a while for you to whittle down their forces. So how do you finish off a game where the opponent's low on life? This is the type of card that will do it very well. But being aware that there is a good face burn in the set that can also just kill creatures on top of that means that you can at least try to stay out of range of it. Next up is Photon Barrage. So this one is a sorcery, but because of how it works, it kind of falls into the mass removal subset. So Photon Blast Barrage is red, and X for a sorcery. When you cast the spell, you copy it X times, and you may choose new targets for the copy. It deals 1 damage to target creature. So the 2 red will get you 1 damage, 2 red and 1 will get you 2 damage, and so on. So for an opponent that has a bunch of mana in play, this is a way to either burn down 1 large creature or kill a large number of smaller creatures for a handful of mana. This is very similar to the card Rolling Thunder, which first appeared in Tempest and then randomly got a reprint in one of the core sets. I think like the 2015 core set or something, going back almost a decade at this point. And Rolling Thunder was always incredibly powerful. Now, granted, Rolling Thunder could also go face, but a lot of the times what you did with Rolling Thunder was just kill a bunch of your opponent's creatures. And Rolling Thunder did not spot you the first point of damage. It was 2 red and X to deal X damage divided among any number of targets. So it costs 3 mana to deal 1 damage with it. So Photon Barrage in any game that has gone long is most likely going to kill multiple creatures. Sometimes their best creature in like an X1, sometimes, 2 or 3 medium-sized creatures. It's going to decimate boards, though. And so you have to be aware of this as a possibility as the game drags on, because you can lose multiple creatures to this and suddenly be in a terrible board state where you were kind of at parity before this spell was cast. Also worth noting, as the thing randomly jumps down into the gold cards, because of how it works, it's very similar to Storm in that countering the Photon Blast Barrage does not actually do it. This is a triggered ability when you cast the spell. So the other points of damage will still go on the stack. So you're going to want to see where all the copies are going before you decide which Photon Blast Barrage, if any, you are going to counter. Also, if you are dividing the damage and you are worried about a counterspell, maybe leave them 1 X1 and deal 1 extra point of damage to the thing you absolutely needed to kill, just in case. Next up is Super Speed. So 1 red mana, it's an aura with flash, it enchants a creature. When it enters, enchanted creature gains first strike until end of turn, and the enchanted creature gets +1/+0 and haste. So we get a lot of tricks like this, where the creature gets +1/+0 and first strike until end of turn. This one sticks around to keep giving it the power boost. It can also be used to give the creature haste and first strike in a turn so that it can attack immediately and just be a decent attacker. But for the purposes of this video, we are more concerned about it suddenly giving the creature first strike in the middle of combat. So you do have to be aware of that, and this is another reason, similar to the giving all the creatures +1/+0, to make sure you're out-muscling the creature by a little bit more, so that way you don't just lose your creature to super speed. It does, again, open you up to getting your creature killed by having it be finished off by the burn spells, but at least if they have to spend the burn spell and the card, it's a lot better. It's only when it's the mass burn spell that's allowing them to kill your bigger guy and still lose the same creatures they would have lost that's actually a problem. Like, your opponent casting Lightning Strike on your creature in addition to having to use this trick in order to take down your 5 toughness creature with like their 2/2, at least they're kind of 2-for-1ing themselves in that they had to play super speed and it's not doing a whole lot afterwards, and you got rid of their best removal spell anyway. Still not great, but it's better than losing your guy by blocking like their 4/4 with your 5/5, and now they're just straight up your dead creature versus their boost on their creature sticking around. It's not much of a card, but it's still a card, and it traded for your 5/5. Team Tactics is 1 in a red for an instant with Teamwork 1. Target creature gains double strike until end of turn. If it was cast using the Teamwork, that creature also gains trample. If you are familiar at all with Temur Battle Rage, this is going to be a game-ending card a lot of the time. So, double strike and trample, aside from Death Touch and Trample, is one of the most brutal combinations in all of Magic. Having Double Strike and Trample allows for a ton of damage to be dealt, and when the creature gets it at instant speed, after blockers have already been declared, you are almost definitely going to die. This has the potential to do an absolute massive amount of damage out of nowhere, and it barely costs anything. It's 2 mana and tapping almost any creature that they have lying around. So, Temur Battle Rage was already one of the most powerful combat tricks ever because of that, and this is Temur Battle Rage in a different suit. Like, the style's changed a little bit, but it's still the same functional card, and it is still going to win you a ton of games, or lose you a ton of games if you're on the receiving end of it. So, this is what you're saving your instant speed removal for a lot of the time. And any combat trick that will push you back out of range of taking lethal damage from a team tactics is going to be a huge deal. Especially if their creatures are large. But even if their creatures are like medium sized, like a 3/3 suddenly gaining double strike and trample represents 6 points of damage, or killing 6 toughness worth of creatures, and anything in between where it's like, oh, it might not even die now. It might kill one of your 2/2s with the first strike damage, and then kill your other 2/2 and trample over for, 2 points of damage on top of that. And now you're down 2 creatures and took some damage, and they still have their creature in play. And that's like the least impressive the double strike trample trick is ever going to do. Next up is Truck Toss, which is 2 red for an instant, but it costs 2 less if you control a vehicle, and it deals 4 damage to any target. Now, granted, this is 4 mana if they don't have a vehicle in play. It is still any target, though, and everything that I said before about Lightning Strike is true of this card also. You can be very much alive and take a little bit of damage, and then suddenly be very dead, where it didn't look like you were going to die at all. This is our second instant speed burn spell that can go to creatures or face. The fact that it gets a cost reduction if they have a vehicle is nice. You are still going to be playing against this card a lot of the time, just because it's going to be able to kill medium and small creatures, and again, when the opponent gets low on life, it becomes player removal. So you do have to be aware of this card's existence also when trying to decide how much blocking you need to do. Yeah, there's a bunch of face burn in this set. I don't think I registered at first that this card could go to any target. I knew it was like a 4 damage burn spell that costs less if you had a vehicle. I think I missed that it could go to face when I first read it. Like, I was actually a little ambushed by it while doing this, which is why I like to do this, so that way I know about all these cards. So that way I don't get ambushed by it at the pre-release. I would like to win those extra packs. This set looks like it's going to have a bunch of expensive cards in it, very similar to the Avatar and Final Fantasy sets. There are a lot of powerful cards that I could see warping formats potentially, and therefore are going to have a lot of high price tag cards in it. Visions of Love is next. This is the card I was talking about before. So this is the one in a red instant. You can discard a card to draw 2 cards, but you can also sacrifice an artifact instead to draw those 2 cards. So if the cards in your hand are worth more than an artifact you happen to have on board, then you can draw more cards. This is, again, just a card draw spell. This is what they're getting priority for if they don't have any of the other cards to work with. Next up is green. And green's first card is a card that every time it shows up on like a bonus sheet or actually in the set, I have to talk about it. So, way back in the day, combat tricks were terrible because creature removal was so efficient. That being said, Giant Growth is still one of the best combat tricks ever printed. And as removal has gotten worse and creatures have gotten better, and creature combat decides a lot more of the victories in limited games than it used to. Like, it used to be just, can you still have a creature in play through all of your opponent's removal spells? Nowadays, it's like, you have a removal spell for a key creature, and the rest of it's going to be combat damage a lot of the time. Giant Growth has only gotten better. And Giant Growth wins almost every combat it's involved in. It is so hard to block or attack in such a way that you don't lose your things to Giant Growth when it gets cast. Like, a 1/1 trades with a 4/4 with this card. And it just keeps getting worse for you after that. So this is a 1-mana trick that normally allows their creature to live and makes yours die. And that kind of mana equity is very, very hard to overcome for a lot of decks. Getting to spend 1 mana to kill your opponent's best creature and you didn't lose anything else other than the 1 card from your hand makes it feel very, swords to plowshares at that point. And also, it's a combat trick. If this creature gets through unblocked, that is 3 extra points of damage. Everything I said about suddenly being dead from Lightning Strike is still kind of true with Giant Growth. If you don't have removal and the creature gets through, that is 3 extra points of damage out of nowhere. Giant Growth can kill a player from a much higher life total than you would think. Giant Growth is one of the best combat tricks ever, and you do have to respect it when deciding where your blocks are going, what creatures you're letting through, if you're going to attack into their smaller creatures. So yeah, Giant Growth being in the set is kind of a huge deal. Next up is Punishing Punch. So this is 2 and a green for an instant, but it costs 2 less if there are 2 or more creature cards in your graveyard. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature and opponent controls. So this is a punch. It's not an actual fight. You don't have to worry about your creature dying. I'm sorry, equal to twice the power of the creature to target creature and opponent controls. I missed the twice in there. Like, this thing was already fine. Not great. Like, you'll run any punch card in your heavy green deck because that's the removal that you're going to have access to. I missed that it's actually twice as much power. Again, this is why I like to do these things, because now I know that their 2/2 can literally punch out my 4/4 and keep going. So, yeah, it's creature removal. It requires a creature to be in play on their side, so you do have the ability to blow out their removal by killing their guy. But removal is going to be at a premium in this set anyway. There are a lot of cards that desperately need to die when they show up because they are that absurd. So, using your removal spell on like their 2/2 trying to punch out your really good creature, yeah, you're going to save your creature, but now you're going to be down the removal spell and you've only killed like their mediocre creature instead. So that might still be an issue later on. You do what you have to, though, so protect your guy. Next up is Rapid Rescue. This is another one that doesn't really affect the board. It's mill 2 cards and put a permanent card from among the milled cards into your hand. It does gain you 2 life, and it is only a single green. And the putting the card back in your, like, if they don't mill a permanent with this card, they do still gain the 2 life. There's a nearly identical card, if not the exact same card, in, I want to say, March of the Machine, or one of the other sets that came after it. where it was green, it milled 2 cards, could put a card into your hand from among the milled cards and gained you 2 life. And while that card seemed incredibly weak to me, it actually saw more play than I was expecting it to. So I'm going to throw that out there in addition to noting that it's not actually affecting the board. The 2 life can swing a very close race, where you were going to die, so the opponent went for the all-out attack, and now you're not dead because you gained 2 extra life. But I was actually very surprised how many people were running the other version of this card in Limited and how often it was working for them. There are a handful of cards in this set, especially in black-green, that care about having cards in the graveyard. Like we just saw Punishing Punch. There are other cards in black and green that do care about having things in your graveyard, and this is a way to set that up while potentially getting you a card's worth of value. So this thing might have more legs than it looks like it does, and I just wanted to point that out. I'm not the best at evaluating how cards are going to play out within their respective environments, and context is the most important thing when determining a card's power level, especially in Limited. But it is worth noting that a card with very similar, if not the exact same game text, did see a lot more play in Limited than I thought it should when the set first came out. So I wanted to point that out here just in case, as something to keep in mind for all of the cards that do care about having a stocked graveyard in order to do their thing. Next up is Tigra. There she is. She is 1 and a green for a 2/1 with flash, trample, and whenever you gain life, she gets a +1/+1 counter. So the bigger thing about her having flash might be having her show up in a situation where the opponent is gaining life. Like if their lifelink creature is about to deal damage, they might flash her in to get another counter on her. But she is still a 2/1 for 2 with flash that can jump out and trade with an X2, where you might have just thought you were going to get through for damage with your creature. So that is another way for them to randomly block and kill a creature in the middle of combat, or suddenly just have an extra attacker. Granted, a 2/1 with trample is not the most impressive body if they're not gaining life, but it's still flash in at end of turn, it's another attacker, and everything I've been saying about like close games where a couple extra points of damage or a couple extra points of life gain matter applies to her because of that. So just keep that in mind. Also, now that I'm at the end of the colors, I should note there is a cycle of basic land cyclers. They all cost 2 to cycle. They all do completely different things. Their bodies are different sizes. Their casting costs are different. But there is a cycle of them, and this could be what is giving your opponent priority for 2 mana on their turn. So if you're worried about combat tricks and whatnot and they're not doing anything, it might be that they don't want to cycle this off and they don't have anything else to do with the mana. They want to try and get to the mana to cast the body. So keep that one in mind. So this one I almost considered not pointing out because it's not on the first chapter, but we're going to go over it real quick just to be on the safe side. So Avengers Under Siege is a saga for 2 black-red. Its first chapter creates 2 2/1 villain creature tokens with menace. Chapter 2 deals 2 damage to each non-villain creature and each opponent. And then Chapter 3 creates a treasure token for each villain you control. So the main reason to point out mass destruction effects is they normally come down and kill everything out of nowhere. And you usually get caught very unawares. This one actually has a full turn of setup where you know that it's coming and can react to it. But if you have already deployed all of your low toughness creatures in the first few turns, then this is a thing that could suddenly come down, and now you get one more turn with them, and they have a bunch of 2/1s in play that they can choose to block with if that's better for them. than waiting for the thing to deal 2 damage to your guys. So that is a factor, and I did want to cover it. I don't think it quite comes up to the point of being similar to like an infest or a pyroclasm, in that you're going to know that it's coming. It's not just going to drop down and kill all of your stuff. Like, if Chapter 2 were Chapter 1, and then you made the 2 ones after that, and then made the treasure for your villains, like, then we would just be talking about it like any other, like I did with the Avengers Disassembled. Next up is Ghost. So, Ghost is 2 and a hybrid blue-black for a 2/2 with flash that can't be blocked. Now, if this thing is flashing into play to trade with your creature, that's probably pretty good for you because it's not going to be around to attack. But there are utility creatures that you would not want to run into Ghost because they would have a lot more value in your deck, but for right now, they're just there to deal a couple points of damage. Like, you do not want to attack Phil Coulson into Ghost if you can help it. Sometimes you just won't know that that's what's coming, or you'll want to get the 2 damage that badly, but it's good to know that she can suddenly pop in and kill your guy in the middle of combat. Also, that she might be the extra attacker, especially since she's going to be unblockable. So having her flash in at end of turn and then be able to go on the offensive immediately is going to be more of an issue for her most of the time. But sometimes she is going to ambush block your utility creature or your 1/1 token and just eat it. So again, you just have to be aware of her. Next up is another one of the most brutal cards you can run into. It is King T'Challa. So King T'Challa is 1 white-blue for a 3/2 with flash, and whenever a player draws their second card each turn, you draw a card. He also has the ability to transform for 4 white-blue at sorcery speed, but he is very similar if you remember the Spider-Man cards with the secret identity and the superhero on the back, in that you can just cast him for 4 white-blue directly from your hand. And he is a 3/3 flash double strike. You prevent all damage that would be dealt to him, and when he deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card. Very similar to Captain Marvel, King T'Challa coming down as the Black Panther on 6 mana will most likely kill one of your attackers without him dying, and then he will be around to attack on the next turn as a 3-power double striker that could potentially draw you 2 cards. King T'Challa is one of the strongest cards in a set with a lot of very strong cards in it. And Flash is a big reason why. They can also flash him in on 3 mana if you're using some card draw effects in order to get an extra card drawn, and have him in play to attack and block with, potentially, until they can get up to the mana to flip him into Black Panther. So you do have to be aware of him even at the lower mana costs. He might show up in response to a Thirst for Knowledge or cracking a clue token or anything similar. Next up is Spider-Man to the rescue. Yep, he is in the set. There are a very small number of Spider people because they are part of the Marvel Universe, and Spider-Man gets dragged into everything. Spider-Man was like their original character that just kept getting put on teams, paired up with other characters, and he's been a member of the Avengers. He's been a member of the Fantastic Four, which, given the name of the group, you would think that they kind of were locked in, but every once in a while, like, somebody needs a break and somebody else will step in to help, and Spider-Man is one of the more common substitute members for the Fantastic Four. If you remember his alternate artwork for Spectacular Spider-Man, where he's just got a paper bag on his head, he is wearing a Fantastic Four uniform otherwise. The Fantastic Four don't hide their identities, though, so he put a paper bag over his head in order to conceal his identity, and that is one of the costumes that shows up a lot when you have alternate Spider-Man costumes as, like, the joke one. So, Spider-Man himself is 2 and a white-green hybrid for a 3/2 with Flash, Vigilance, and Reach. And when Spider-Man enters, you may tap him, and when you do, another target non-attacking creature you control gains indestructible until end of turn. Spider-Man will web sling in and save one of your creatures if you need him to. He is also a 3 power creature with vigilance and reach that can flash in and just, kill a flyer. So usually he's going to trade for that flyer, but very similar to how the ant just comes in out of nowhere and then is an attacker next turn. Spider-Man comes in out of nowhere and is a blocker. So he can in fact stop those giant flying creatures from just getting through unchecked. Again, he's going to trade with most of them because he only has 2 toughness, but he's also an uncommon. And he also got to be the star of his other set, so, he doesn't need to be insanely powerful here. He's still incredibly good, though. And saving one of your other creatures that's not in the middle of attacking your opponent means that removal spells, bad blocks all of a sudden because of combat tricks. Spider-Man is here to rescue you. Next to him is Spider-Woman, Secret Agent. She is 3 in a hybrid white-blue for a 1/4 with Flash. When she enters, she taps target creature an opponent controls, and that creature doesn't untap for as long as you control Spider-Woman. So she's not the best attacker, but she is very good at locking down an opponent's creature. And she can also block 3 power creatures for the most part. We've seen like a few ways that can go sideways, and 2 power creatures very effectively. So if she shows up in the middle of combat to eat a 2/1 or a 1/1 and lock down your opponent's creature so that it's not going to be attacking anymore, that's pretty good. If she shows up before combat to stop those smaller creatures from attacking and prevent the bigger creature from attacking as long as she's in play, that's also pretty good. So you do have to worry about her doing both of those things. Also, her showing up at the end of the turn in order to lock down the blocker that you thought you had and then be an additional point of damage on the offense is also a factor that you need to worry about. Alright, next up is Thanos the Mad Titan. So, as I alluded to before, red, white, and black for a 4/4 Death Touch lifelink. He also has the power-up mechanic, and while it does cost all 5 colors of mana, and very specifically a colorless, which is not something that a lot of lands and artifacts in the set are producing, so it is very difficult to actually activate Thanos the turn that he comes down. He can be activated on the turn he comes down, and he will cost the white, red, and black mana less. So if your opponent is on 6 mana and is playing a bunch of colors, you do actually have to respect that Thanos might be coming. Because he is one of the only reasons in the set to be running this many colors. The other reason is splashing certain cards. So while he is very difficult to power up and actually kill things with, if they are building towards him, you will know that he's about to arrive, most likely. He's not just going to come out of nowhere entirely. So when he powers up, he gets 2 1/1 counters, so he's a 6/6 Death Touch lifelink, which is already kind of a problem. And then you choose odd or even, and he destroys each creature with each other creature. He does spare himself, and I did know that one. I just accidentally skipped over the other creature. With mana value equal to the chosen quality. So if you choose even, he kills everything, and for the purposes of game effects, 0 is even, so he kills all tokens that don't have, like a mana cost from copying things or whatnot. He also kills all of your 2s, 4s, 6s, 8s, etc. Or he can choose odd, and aside from himself, kill all the 1s, 3s, 5s, etc. So the opponent will know definitely that he's coming and be able to try and sculpt their board towards that. Once you realize that the opponent might be building towards Thanos, you have 2 options. You either have to kill them very quickly so that Thanos does not show up and decimate their board, or you have to try to also sculpt your board as much as you can so that at least they're losing all of their stuff if they're killing all of your stuff. If they have a bunch of even creatures with the idea that they're just going to name odd and keep Thanos and all their even creatures, then your even creatures go up in. If the opponent is a mix and match, then you want to match them as best you can power level wise too. Like if their other best creatures are, besides Thanos, are odd, you want your best creatures to be odd, so that way if you can help it. Like, obviously, it's limited. There's only so much you can do. But if you have the choice between playing like a powerful 4-drop and playing a powerful 3-drop, it might actually be worth playing the 3-drop if most of their things are odd also, in case Thanos shows up. So that way they're at least losing their other good creatures to killing your stuff, or you're not losing your best guy while they're trying to keep their best guys in play. He's going to show up, and it's going to be bad times if they can cast him without being able to activate him. A 4/4 Death Touch lifelink does a lot to keep a player in the game and stop the opponent's best stuff from just... next up is Worlds Within Worlds. So I have this on the list because it can dramatically rewrite what the board is, and because the opponent knows that it's coming, it can function a lot like a Wrath because of that. So what it does is, first it exiles all creatures. Don't worry, they're not gone forever. Then each player may put any number of creature cards from their hand onto the battlefield. Then you put all the cards exiled with this card into their owner's hands, and then you exile this spell. So what this does is it gets rid of everything on board. Then it allows both players to put all of the creatures from their hands, if they want to, into play. Then it puts all of the creatures that got removed back into the opponent's hand. So it essentially bounces everything and lets you play anything that didn't get bounced by it, in a very roundabout way to make sure that that's very clear how it's working. So what this means is that if your opponent has their best creatures in hand while you have spent all of your mana deploying your best creatures, and they cast this spell, they will suddenly have their best creature in play, and your best creature will be back in your hand, and you'll have to spend the mana recasting it next turn, while they get to start attacking with their best creature on their next turn. So this can dramatically reshape a board, and depending on what the opponent has in their hand and what you manage to have in your hand, will determine whether or not you even have a board state after this, or if you have to spend time scrambling to put one back together afterwards. So just be aware of this. Again, the problem is that there are not a lot of proper Wraths in the main set. In fact, there's nothing that I would actually count as a proper Wrath in the main set. Worlds Within Worlds might be the closest. But there are so many on the bonus sheet that you do still have to be scared of Wraths, even though they're even less likely to show up than a normal Mythic Rare would be. So there are a lot of powerful cards on the bonus sheet, but we're just going to go over the ones that fall into the category. And our very first one is Don't Move. So this is 3 white. This originally appeared in the Jurassic World collection that was a special subset in Lost Caverns of Ixalan. And Don't Move, so it's white and 3 for a sorcery. It destroys all tapped creatures, and until your next turn, whenever a creature becomes tapped, this effect destroys it. So Don't Move will kill everything that is already tapped, and then if anything becomes tapped for the rest of this turn cycle, it will kill that creature also. So anything they attacked with last turn that is now tapped on the battlefield just dies immediately. You don't get to attack them back without losing your stuff unless they have vigilance. But this also means that they can attack you with anything they didn't attack you with last turn unless they want to lose it on their next turn, including like haste creatures that they might cast, or things that didn't have a good attack for some reason last turn that somehow do now. But yeah, it stops them from... It kills all the stuff they attacked with, and then stops the stuff that they have in play from attacking on the next turn on top of that. Next up is Ephemerate. It is white for an instant, and it exiles target creature, immediately returns it to the battlefield. So it dodges removal, and then the card has rebound, so it can blink a creature for value on their next turn, but it can't be used to save anything. So yeah, the first time this is cast, it's usually going to be to save something from a removal spell or a combat that's gone sideways. After that, it will be used to blink a creature for value. It's 1 white mana. It's very, very difficult to play around.
The closest thing to playing around it might be killing their creature that has a strong ability that's not a comes into play ability. So that way, when they ephemerate it, they at least don't get the extra value. But that's going to be more along the lines of, is this the correct creature to kill? Because whatever you're targeting, if they have ephemerate off of the bonus sheet, it's going to get saved. Also, it's off the bonus sheet, so it's really hard to play around the bonus sheet cards to begin with. The only reason why I'm playing around a Wrath on the bonus sheet is because of how many there actually are. Speaking of which, Final Showdown. Originally from Outlaws of Thunder Junction, it costs a white initially, but it has Spree. So for 1 mana, all creatures lose all abilities until end of turn. For +1 mana again, you choose a creature and it gains indestructible until end of turn. And for an additional 3 white, it destroys all creatures. Notably, this thing is an instant. So I did do a video like this for Outlaws of Thunder Junction, and I did point out at the time that this thing has so many modes that are all incredibly relevant. First of all, for white and 1, it can take away all abilities. This means that attacking flying creatures fall out of the sky and can now be blocked. That indestructible creatures can now die from the damage marked on them. And anything else going on, like first strike, double strike going away, all of that. So that's one of the modes that this thing does. Also, for white and 1, it can give one of your creatures indestructible until end of turn, meaning it can save the creature from most of the removal that a lot of the other protection effects can do. For white and 2, it can take away all abilities and then give one of your creatures indestructible because you always do the effects in the order that they are listed on the card when it's doing multiple things. So first everything will lose all abilities, then your creature will gain indestructible. So if the combat wasn't already suddenly in your favor, it probably is now that one of your creatures is indestructible and their things are no longer indestructible, flying, lifelink, first strike, any of that. It's also 3 white and 3 for an instant speed Wrath. And that is absurdly brutal. They can Wrath in the middle of combat once they know which creature, like if you're going to play a haste creature or something, to absolutely make sure they kill all of the stuff. Or they can Wrath at the end of your turn with the idea that they're going to untap with all their mana and start deploying their new threats. And if they have enough mana to cast all of these together, they will rob your creatures of indestructible and other effects that might stop them from dying to this, save their best creature, and kill all of the things in play. Final Showdown is absolutely absurd if you can cast it. The only problem is how intense the mana gets for the higher casting costs on it. Then we go to the opposite end of that spectrum with Path to Exile, one of Wizards' favorite cards to reprint on the bonus sheet. It's a creature kill spell. It's literally one of the best creature kill spells ever printed. The only thing I will say about Path to Exile for newer players is you do not want to use this early if you can help it. There are very few creatures that are so powerful they are worth giving your opponent a land in the early game. You should still always run this, and this is again directed at newer players. This is literally one of the best removal spells ever printed. For 1 white mana, it exiles the creature and they get a land. And in the mid to late game, an extra land is usually not that good. Lands are like the worst draws in your deck once you have enough land in play to do the thing. Whatever the thing your deck is trying to do is. So drawing more lands is usually to your detriment. So getting a land back as the replacement for your awesome creature is the worst of conciliary prizes at that point. Yeah, one of the best removal spells ever printed. Next up is Righteous Fury. So this also destroys all tapped creatures. It costs 2 white and 4 this time, but you gain 2 life for each creature destroyed this way. This is originally from a Portal set. I think it was Portal 1, it might be Portal 2. And I don't think it has ever gotten reprinted in an actual, like, Magic set where you could draft it and play it. So, not only is it a Wrath that might only kill your opponent's creatures that attacked, last turn, but it is going to give you life back for each of those creatures that died. So if you took a whole lot of damage to not lose your creatures in combat, this will pay you back a huge chunk of that life when it resolves. So this thing is absolutely absurd in Limited. Next up, speaking of absurd cards, Teferi's Protection, rethemed as T'Challa's Protection. Alright, so until your next turn, your life total can't change, you gain protection from everything, all permanents you control phase out, and you exile Teferi's Protection. This is the most absurd fog ever. Make sure that you do not lose to anything. It saves your stuff from mass removal, and there are a few cards that can get around this, but they are very few and far between, and I don't think any of them are actually in this set. So yeah, if your opponent has Teferi's Protection, you can expect your I was about to win the game moment to just go absolutely sideways and for you to die. Next up in blue, we have Actual Factual Counterspell, 2 blue, counter target spell. It's on the bonus sheet, so it's incredibly hard to play around. It is way more likely that you are playing around We Say Thee Nay than that you are playing around Counterspell. And unfortunately, Counterspell actually does work in such a way that playing around We Say Thee Nay is probably going to get your better spell countered. Because that is normally what you do, is you either try to get them to counter a bad spell, or don't present them with any targets. Which means that you have to have a developed board state, and they have to be holding up mana to try and counter your next good spell, and you're just not letting them. And they keep falling further and further behind on board. Next up is Dig Through Time, 2 blue and 6, but it has Delve. It looks at a bunch of cards and it puts 2 of them into your hand. It's another card draw spell. It is an absurdly powerful card draw spell, and because of the Delve, you might be able to cast it for 2 blue mana, but at the end of the day, it is just a card draw spell, and there's no real playing around any of that. Next up is Narset's Reversal, themed as Black Panther's Redirection. So Narset's Reversal copies an instant or sorcery spell and then returns the original copy to the owner's hand. So very similar to what we saw in the previous set with the bonus sheet reprint of Make Your Move. Very similar to that. This is a card where it's incredibly powerful when cast at the right time, but it very rarely seems to actually come up the way you want it to, where it just does all of the things. It like saves your guy, kills their guy, and stops them. But it is still potentially very potent. It stops their spell from working right this second, and lets you hit their thing with it, or lets you do the thing with it, because it does just copy the spell. Like, if you were to hit Dig Through Time, you would get to look at your top 6 and put the best 2 cards into your hand instead. So, and if they delved away a bunch of cards, they might even struggle to recast the spell after that. That's like the ideal scenario, though. Like, if you're copying like a Thirst for Knowledge, you get to draw the cards. If you're copying a discard spell, you get to make them discard, and you get to keep your cards until they can recast the discard spell. So that is what you have going on with this card. So you do have to be aware of it, that the opponent who has enough blue mana open might just be able to stop your spell and get a copy of it. Next up is 3 Steps Ahead. So this is another spree card. So it starts off by costing blue, and for 2 blue and 1, it counters target spell. So for adding an extra 1 and a blue to it. But you can also add mana to copy a creature you control, or to draw 2 cards and discard a card. So the big thing about this, as far as suddenly they have a creature in play, is that almost everything, I believe, that's an uncommon or rare creature in this set is legendary. So the number of things they can actually copy, because this does not have the non-legendary clause attached to it, because it's not from this set, where several other cards in this set do have that clause because of how many legendary creatures there are in it. This one cannot copy a lot of the more powerful cards in the set because they're not going. It's not going to stick around. Now they can copy it if it's tapped and have an untapped copy of it, but now it's a token and they have to get rid of the original. So it's more that it is a counter spell and sometimes also a card draw spell. And every once in a great while, it's going to be able to make a token copy of their non-legendary creature. So you do have to be a little aware of that if they have like the basic land cycling dinosaur, for example. Moving into black, we get all of the other mass removal spells. But before that, Deadly Dispute lets you sacrifice a creature or artifact as an additional cost to cast it. You draw 2 cards and you make a treasure token. This is one of the more powerful versions of this effect. It does cost 2 mana, but it rebates you 1 mana immediately, and if you don't spend that 1 mana, it sits around as a treasure token to be used on other turns to cast spells. It lets you sacrifice something that was going to die anyway, usually, or something that has already served its purpose in order to find more action. It's on the bonus sheet, so it's going to show up a lot less, but other than that, it is a particularly strong card. Like, surprisingly strong compared to what it first read as when it got printed in Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. Next to that, Extinction Event, I already mentioned, so you choose odd or even, and you exile all creatures of the chosen quality for black and 3. This was originally in Ikoria, and I did not get to play a lot of Ikoria Limited because of the pandemic, and I did not have a computer that could run Arena at the time, so like my computer would start dying if I tried to turn on Arena, so I did not get to play much back then. But I'm pretty sure that a Wrath that excludes certain things and that you know is coming and therefore can sculpt around is pretty potent, because it normally is. Next up is Final Act. Similar to Teferi's Protection, I'm going to just bring it up for myself. I know one of the modes is a Wrath effect, but I want to make sure I have all the effects. So choose one or more. It's very similar to Farewell. It was originally printed in a Commander set, and so has not been playable in any limited format as far as I know. I don't think it's been on Magic Online in any of the cubes or anything. But it's choose one or more, destroy all creatures, destroy all planeswalkers, destroy all battles, exile all graveyards, each opponent loses all counters. There aren't any energy counters or any other positive counters in this set that I'm aware of. So at the end of the day, and there are no planeswalkers and no battles, so this thing is 6 mana to kill all creatures, and if you would like to, you can also exile all. So if you need to stop all of your opponent's creatures from coming back from the graveyard, for example, the Thunderbolts Conspiracy, because you resolve all parts of the spell before anything else can go on the stack, you can kill all of their creatures and then exile their graveyard in order to make sure that those creatures are not coming back. And then we also have to talk about Electra, because this version of Electra is Massacre Girl, the original Massacre Girl. So when she enters the battlefield, creatures get -1/-1 until end of turn, other than her. And, whenever a creature dies, creatures other than her get -1/-1 until end of turn. So she comes down and she kills all of the X1s, and then for each creature that died from that effect, she kills all of the 2 toughness creatures, and then 3 toughness creatures, and so on. But if she kills multiple X1s, then she will kill like your 3 toughness and 4 toughness creatures other than her. So she can get very out of hand very quickly because of that. So she has the potential, if the board state is in the right place, to just kill everything. So you do need to be aware of her, except for her, so your opponent will be left with a 4/4 menace. Next we go into red. First red card is Chaos Warp. As is tradition, it shuffles the thing back into their deck, and then they reveal the top card, and if it's a permanent card, they get to put it onto the battlefield. It can deal with any permanent type. There is the risk of it giving them a better thing. Chaos Warp is usually not particularly good in limited, because giving your opponent a replacement thing, giving your opponent a replacement creature is the... So if this does manage to hit a creature, now there's a chance that you'll shuffle their creature in and they'll hit an instant or sorcery and get nothing, and this will have actually just straight up murdered their creature. Like it's back in their deck somewhere where they have to find it again, so they can't even reanimate it. But it is back in their deck, so they can potentially draw it again. But there is also the potential that if you kill something that was mildly obnoxious now, it can turn into anything else in their deck. So if it's a land, that's probably fine. If it's an artifact or enchantment, it might be a minor problem, or even a major problem, depending on what it is. And if it's a creature, it is absolutely terrible for you. So you have to decide for yourself whether or not you want to run Chaos Warp. Very popular in Commander because it can deal with any permanent type, and it is in red, which notoriously cannot deal with enchantments. So being able to kill a very powerful enchantment in the early part of the game is usually worth the risk of the opponent hitting some massive bomb, especially in Commander, where there are other players who might deal with that bomb for you anyway. Here, your opponent hits something crazy, you're just going to have to deal with it all on your own, and that's probably not going to go too well for you. So you have to decide if you want to flip that coin. Similar to Path to Exile, later in the game, where their thing is absolutely nuts, Chaos Warping it, and fingers crossed it hits a land or hits something slightly less insane. Turning Captain Marvel into most of the other creatures in this set is not that bad. And there's always the tiny risk that you flip up the exact same card, and that's just the worst feeling. Monstrous Rage is back, so that is also in this set. It's on the bonus sheet this time, like the more rare bonus sheet, the less likely to show up bonus sheet. So whereas it was on the Mystical Archives and you could run into Monstrous Rage reasonably often, this time it's on the much rarer bonus sheet, so there is a chance that you will never see this card the entire time you are playing this format, or that you will run into it like multiple times and be like, really? Monstrous Rage again? One of the best combat tricks ever printed. This one does a lot less to save your creature than Giant Growth does, but +3 power and trample pushes a lot of damage out of nowhere, and usually allows your creature to trade for their thing or trade up for their thing for a single mana and possibly deal them a bunch of damage. Target creature gains double strike is the first part of that, so that might allow them to attack with all of their creatures and ambush you with team tactics and still get the double strike and trample. I'm just throwing that one out there. Real quick, so this one can dramatically change where the board state is at, so I did feel the need to point it out. So this is Bedlam. It was originally printed in Urza's Saga, and I don't think it's been reprinted, at all. It's a 4-mana enchantment, and while it's in play, creatures can't block. So this is one of those can dramatically swing a race, or suddenly make it so that it is a race where it wasn't before. Ground is gummed up, opponent has way too many blockers. If their attackers cannot kill you, and yours either can or can in 2 swings, dropping Bedlam is the 2-turn clock that you need. So just be aware of this thing. It can basically negate all of your creatures out of nowhere when you need blockers. Next we get to green. So Grim Fate is Beast Within. It is 2 and a green. It kills a creature. It kills any permanent and gives the permanent's controller a 3/3. I do not think you should play this in almost every scenario, even with the high power level of this set. Giving your opponent a 3/3 creature to replace their dead thing, which is normally going to be a creature anyway, is usually to your detriment. There are a lot of times where giving your opponent a 1/1 creature with no abilities is still a minor problem that can make the removal spell worth not running. And giving them a 3/3 is an actual real body on an empty board or a light board. You cannot turn their thing into a 3/3 and expect that to go great for you most of the time. Because you are spending a card and to downgrade their thing, not to kill it. This means that it is still available to attack and block and do all the things creatures do, and that is usually a problem. There are definitely going to be times where you beast within a thing and the thing that you killed was so exponentially more powerful than the 3/3 that you're giving them that it's going to feel good and correct to have run it. Most of the time, though, giving your opponent a replacement 3/3 means that you still lose that game a certain percentage of the time just by giving them another body to work with to replace the one that you just killed. So I do feel inclined to point this out, and this is not just like, oh, I play these cards, and it's like, no, um, better Magic players than me will also tell you this. It's not just that it feels like that happens a lot; it's that it happens way more often than you think it would. Like you imagine killing like Captain Marvel with this in response to her gaining indestructible, and it's just like you needed to stop her and you had Beast Within and it worked. Yeah, that's the type of card you need to be killing with Beast Within for it to even kind of be worth it. Like if you're not killing something of that caliber with Beast Within, you are losing this game because of that. Like trading like killing their like 6/5 dinosaur and giving them a 3/3 is a losing proposition because you are down a card and they are down half of their dinosaur now. Like that is a terrible exchange for you. Force of Vigor is up next. It is the green portion of the Force cycle from Modern Horizons. So it can destroy an artifact or enchantment. I'm sorry, two artifacts and or enchantments. And you can exile a green card from your hand to cast it on your opponent's turn without paying its mana cost. So there's not a ton of instant speed artifact and enchantment removal in the main set, but there are a couple of cards on the bonus sheet. So if your Doomsday enchantment, like your Avengers Assemble, needs to not wander off in the middle of combat, this is the type of card you have to hope that your opponent didn't find. Heroic Intervention has 3 different artworks. So there are 3 different chances to get Heroic Intervention. As far as I know, it's at least, like, each individual one is as rare as any other card on the bonus sheet. I don't know if that means it's 3 times more likely you will run into Heroic Intervention because there are 3 different artworks for it. I have to imagine that's the way it's going to work, but depending on how, it's entirely possible that there's like 3 copies of any one card on the bonus sheet, except when you get to Heroic Intervention, there's 1 copy of each of them. So it might be the exact same rarity, or it might be 3 times more likely to show up than any other bonus sheet card. But it is permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn for 1 and a green. That wrecks every combat. It stops removal. It makes everything terrible for you for 2 mana in a game that is primarily going to come down to a creature's attacking and blocking and dealing combat damage. Because it is going to save all of your stuff in the middle of a bad combat and let you survive because your creatures were able to block, or it's going to stop a removal spell and make the attack terrible, or stop a removal spell in the middle of combat and save all of your stuff while you're attacking them. Like, all of that's good. All of it's for 2 mana. Heroic Intervention is very difficult to play around and is going to win a lot of games. Next up is the gold. So, Fight to the Death is destroy all blocking creatures and all blocked creatures. So anything that got into combat is now dead. So their 2/2 on your 5/5. Their 2/2 was dead anyway. Now your 5/5 is also dead. So, yeah, this is still an insane card to have to try and figure out that your opponent has and to play around properly. And there's not a whole lot of playing around this one. Your things are going to die, their things are going to die, but they get to decide, like, which creatures are which, like, what creatures they put on what of your creatures when they cast the spell, so. Next up is Sundering Growth. This is 2 hybrid white-green. It destroys target artifact or enchantment, and you populate. Yeah, there are a bunch of other incredibly powerful cards on the bonus sheet. But these are the ones that can kill a whole lot of your stuff, or can be cast at instant speed. There's still gonna be like, I'm looking at privileged position. It's like, how do you beat that in this format? There's so little like good artifact and enchantment removal to begin with, and now all of your creatures are going to be immune to removal until your opponent finds one of the cards that deals with this. There are going to be decks that literally cannot deal with this, and all their removal is going to get blanked. Which was true of Privileged Position when it was originally printed back in Ravnica. So yeah, that is the entire set. All of your instants, spells with flash, and cards that can kill multiple creatures. So I hope this helps you in preparing for your pre-release and for the first week of like Arena and Magic Online and the first couple drafts you do in paper. I know it always helps me. So if this does help you, please let me know. I would appreciate it. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Have a good rest of your day.